are here on a very special episode of the PokePopCast. We are driving in cars with judges. Trademark. I'm here with Doug Morisoli. A lot of people are familiar with Doug as taking pictures at a lot of big events. But a lot of people may not know that Doug is actually a very good, top-notch judge in the New Jersey area, where I was a PTO and I ran New York State, so I had Doug act as head judge for me at a lot of my events. So we're going to talk about a few different things. Doug is in a kind of unusual position in Pokemon, kind of a unique position, where he is connected, has good connections with the players, other judges, and also a lot of the organizing managers at Pokemon directly. So he knows a lot. He thinks a lot about Pokemon. Doug, what's your give us a little background on how you got involved in Pokemon, what you've been doing?
Boy, it's always every one of us has a unique as a Poke parent. How did we get involved in Pokemon? And I bet a lot of commonality that it really started with my children playing the DS game back in 2007. We ended up seeing a box of cards. My wife and I saw a box of cards. We thought they were flash cards, and she liked Piplup back in the Diamond and Pearl, when Diamond and Pearl very first came out. And I saw this deck, what I now know today is a theme deck, okay? I thought it was a box of flashcards, something she was interested. Her mom and I put it in. Lo and behold, we went home and opened it up with her and saw it's a game. And they told us to go to Pokemon.com and learn about a game and find a league. Long story short, we ended up at a league in our area. I think we were very fortunate in our case that the league had a number of, it was more young, junior oriented, a lot of juniors. It was Rob Gaylor and his son Robbie Gaylor, for the folks in our area, if they can remember that, game store. And we got started. And one day, I think Rob Gaylor said, hey, your daughter's pretty good at this. Have you ever considered competitive Pokemon? And I'll never forget that day, because I thought that was like competitive cheerleading, some whole new thing. Didn't even know what it was. And he asked us to carpool to a regionals. And we saw the regionals, and my daughter had a fun time. And she was 5.5, I think, at that time, and it was a great day. We met her judge, my first exposure to organized play as a parent. This is one of the things on my mind, sort of like a customer service story, is that we were completely new to regionals. I think there was a judge making announcements very loudly. My daughter was crying. I went out to go see her. And hey, if you don't want to be here, we can leave. She said, no, I really want to play Pokemon, but this lady scares me. It's too loud. Even basic things like that, we should be on our mind. But at the end of the tournament, I think Sid was, I don't know, whatever she was. She lost 3 games or whatever match. I think she ended up 18th or 19th in juniors and didn't make top cut, but had a good day. And the judge came by and welcomed us and said, hey, you're a new face. Thanks for playing. You're a new player. Give you some feedback on the day, on playing. What questions do you have? Encouraged my daughter to play more and look forward to seeing her come back. And the judge introduced himself. It was Greg Salk, whose son is in the back seat here. So obviously we formed a relationship there. But that was my first introduction to organized play and interacting with judges and staff. And over time, as both my children started playing, I realized that I didn't want to be the hovering sort of helicopter, little league parent, and I had advice to maybe volunteer and get into that to help. So I started pitching in. I think Greg asked me, and Dorian Redburn in our area, along with Mike. Just as things lead to another, you look for ways that you can pitch in and help. And what can I do at these events? And really, I wanted to stay out of my daughter's way, let her have a good time, but help be part of the event. So I started judging, I think, in 2008. After that, the end of 2008. So I've been
10 years.
Yeah, judging, going on 10 years here.
All right. So,
that's the 3 deep breaths. That's how you go from Poke Parent to 10 years of judging.
And of course, got into just taking pictures at the big events where a lot of people know you from,
Right.
And everyone wants one of your pictures as their for their avatar picture because you just take such great pictures.
Thanks.
One of the things we're going to be talking about is, as Doug touched on, is the customer service aspect of not only running events but judging at events and just being on staff at an event. And we'll touch on some other areas too as we talk. We're going to start our conversation here talking about the customer service aspects of staffing events. So, Doug, you were talking a little bit before we started recording. You want to get back into what you had been saying?
Well, I think, on one level, and appropriately so, there's a lot of discussion about, generally, and I think it's ongoing discussion, of things like slow play, shuffling, randomization, how does a particular card interact with another card. It's sort of the technical aspects of judging that we do. And we can always be, we should be on top of our game and sharing on that. But I think also, and importantly, even those aspects, there's the customer service aspect of our role as judges.
Right.
At one, in the judge community, we, the phrase I guess we use fair, fun, and fast, and making sure that both attendees, not just players, but going to those events, you have parents, you have siblings, you have friends, and not just the player community, but vendors, etc. People are assessing and formulating judgments about the Pokemon activity and organized play, and essentially, as a judge, we are the face to that public.
Right. Yeah.
We're public face to that, and yes, it encompasses our ability for accurate rulings and timely rulings, etc. But we have interactions with parents, and whether they're spectating or they're concerned about rulings, things of that nature, and even at a more mundane level of just being attentive to helping what time is lunch and when do we need to be back, and that we're responsive to that, and it's not, oh gee, I don't know, I don't have an answer to that, you've got to go somewhere else.
Yeah. So let me jump in here. So we'll go back and forth. A lot I always say, and a lot of people surprised with it coming from me, is I put rules knowledge and things like that as like down at number 3 on my list of judge skills in terms of importance. And so I always put the number 1 important skill is being able to interact with people skills.
Right.
That's really the number 1 skill for being either, whether you're talking about being a TO or a judge or just staffing Pokemon in general, because you can get a lot of forgiveness for a lot of different things. You can fix things, but if you can't interact well with people and know that job number 1 is customer service, that we're here. People can spend their weekend doing anything they want. They can be off golfing, they can be playing basketball, they can be playing video games at home. They're coming out to an event that makes them feel good being there, and a big part of making them feel good being there is the interactions with staff. If they have bad interactions with staff, and that can turn them off. You gave an example for us, a judge being very harsh in their announcements and interactions with players, and turning off a brand new player, and luckily not turning your daughter off so much that you didn't leave at that point.
Yeah, I think that's just being aware of how we're coming across in our environment, and that was an example of one that affected the entire environment, and not maliciously. I think the person had no idea, just combination of unique voice and loud intercom, and it was something that people were commenting, but just our tone, our conduct, etc. If you're a new judge, I would encourage you, on the go to the professor forums. There's a judge manual. Get your hands on that. People have put, that's a document that's evolved over the years, right, Mike?
Yeah,
a lot of thought went into that.
Yeah, so the judge manual actually, now that you're speaking about it, is something that was last edited and revamped a few years ago, and of course there's been some major changes in tournaments in the last few years. So right now we're in the process. Some top level judges and tournament organizers are helping Team Compendium update that. That's the judge manual is really Kim Carey's baby. He's been the editor in chief of that, and he wants and needs as much input from the top judges as possible. So I'll put the word out there that if you're feeling like you can contribute well to updating the judge manual, drop me an email and we'll get you in touch with helping do that.
And even though some aspects may be outdated, I think a number of the things we're talking about are sort of timeless.
Yes.
Okay. And it has things, depending on the age group you're dealing with, things like, if you're working with a junior, the importance of, getting down on their level and how you interact with juniors. And if you're an experienced judge, you're well aware of some of the things that, I'm talking now. So I'm really more addressing new judges and just consulting. And I think having an attitude of, not invented here. We don't, it's good if we can know everything. I don't think everybody knows everything, and kind of checking egos that it's okay to say, I think I know, but I'm not sure, I'm going to consult. That's a good aspect of customer service. When we consult with other judges on the floor, it shows the player that we really, players are paying money now, more than ever, for attending events, and there's bigger prizes at stake. Lots at stake. I think they want to know that they're getting quality attention to their questions and that careful thought, and we're not shooting from the hip. And even, and I know, Mike, we talk about this offline a lot, even when we kind of think or it's something we know is a layup, I think it looks good to the players that we really affirm what we are doing and bring that thought to bear. Taking it another step, when we really don't know or something has hair on it, there's going to be penalties involved at your events. Your head judges will, there's, when you have prize penalty or worse involved, usually you need to be bringing the head judge involved.
Right.
But I just say, when just a general guideline of service, when something's a mess, whether it's even outside of the technical, but disgruntled feelings, etc., bringing more experience to bear to that table and surrounding yourself with that not only prevents you from being on that island and bearing this alone, but you're going to get other perspectives, and you're going to get other experience, and a number of things are going to be served well. That putting yourself in the shoes of the players or the parent there, they're going to see that you take this seriously, and that we are trying to move the ball forward and get the right answer. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I think some of the problems I've had in judging, where I've made mistakes or gone down the wrong rat hole, and we are on the clock. We want to, time is precious, so players are more concerned about extensions and how we use our time, and that we rule quickly. And so being able to think on your feet and use that time and gather that information quickly and assess it is important. And the times where I've assumed, I've thought that you come up to a table, you hear from both players, and if you're not listening very carefully, you may assume that it's very similar to something that you commonly see, but each situation is unique, and there may be, this has happened to me, on times where I'm sure any judges will experience that a player may express something to you, but you didn't probe enough, and you may have understood at that first inception level, and then as a judge you go and you're addressing that, only to find out later that the problem expanded. It's really over here, or the root of it, the problem is elsewhere, or that something occurred, the root of a cause occurred turns ago, rather not. And they're focusing on what's happening at the moment now, because that's their point of contention.
Yeah, things can take a left turn.
Yeah, as you peel back the onion, as a judge, you found, oh, wait, we've got a real problem here, as you reconstruct it elsewhere. And that's kind of a skill, I think. I've learned from Mike and Greg and others, people have judged for a long time. I think sort of the NCIS, or the forensic analysis of game state, and how did we get here and reconstruct it, and trying to do that in an effective, accurate, unbiased manner is its own art. Okay, it's a separate art from, do I know what power affects what, when, where, why.
Now toward that end, I want you to speak on this, because I've mentioned this in other podcasts I've done, but it's your example. The importance of listening to both players and not walking up and one player says, this is what happened. And so...
Are you talking about Sydney Worlds?
Yeah, I'll let you take it from there. Yeah,
this is really... Maybe this is like, so many judges will say, what really caused you to get an organized play? And you'll say, well, maybe you observed some difficult judging experiences and you think, wow, how can I help or want to have a better outcome than that? That it was at Worlds, I want to say we went in 2010, 2012. I want to say it was 2010 because it was LCQ. Sydney had qualified after that. So she was in a match, and not to get into all the details, but and it also involved kind of maybe a special needs player, okay? And it was her opponent. And observing distantly, it involved a Don fan deck, and Sydney was playing jump left, so it was 2010. And she was doing mass attack twice. Definitely knocks out that that Don fan with full benches, okay? And the individual, took his Pokemon, put it in the discard pile, game went to him. And while I rarely watch my daughter play, this is one of the times I happen to just be watching. And if you remember Hawaii, you're up in an elevated deck looking down into this punch bowl setting.
Right.
And her opponent raised his hand and called a judge. Judge said, I don't think my opponent's been accounting for exoskeleton. I had a Pokemon that was just knocked out. I don't think it should be knocked out. And the judge turned to my daughter without doing any other fact gathering and said, oh, that's okay, little girl. Damage is hard to calculate. We understand. Let me go see what the penalty is going to be. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
And there was no, and as a parent, that bothered me from kind of a gender, and I know the intent wasn't there, but kind of what we're also talking about, the appearance, right? So we can have, how we affect people. We may not have intent to do things, but a third-party observer may think we're bringing bias or insensitivity. Like, did we take a boy's opinion over a girl and not even fact gather from the girl, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, and it doesn't even have to be a boy or a girl issue. It could just be the fact that one player is more outgoing and the other player is more introverted.
A lot of factors can go into it.
And so you can't just go by what is presented to you. You need to make sure that from both players, if one player is not giving it to you, you need to make sure you get it from them.
Yeah.
Their side of the story, and not make any assumptions, because as soon as you make assumptions, you're probably going to be wrong a good part of the time.
Yeah. For those who want the rest of the story, it didn't matter to Sid. I think they only passed 8 or 10 people through an LCQ. I think she ended up winning that game, but it had no consequence in the overall state of affairs.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to segue into, and it still includes customer service, but there's a lot of new tournaments being run in the past couple of years where Pokemon has moved the model from being a relatively small number of premier tournament organizers running all the major events around the country to where all the events now, the local events, are all centric to the stores where the leagues are. And so there's a lot of new tournament organizers, a lot of new judges starting up events or running their events. And what we'd like to talk about here is how can you give your customers the best experience of running your local events properly and well, so that when the people come, Doug, we were starting to talk about, like on Facebook, you see a lot of people complaining about things.
Yeah, I think on the topic of customer service, that where we visibly hear from both players and parents, whether I participate, Carlos runs a PokeDad Facebook group, and a lot of parents where we talk about issues like this of the experience, and whether you go to Burbank or Hey Fonte or wherever. I think some negative experiences out of the League Cup experience, particularly from whether it's less experienced judges or TOs, I think reporting, non-reporting of events, that type of thing. Let's stick to judging. I think, if you're a newer judge and you're in that store, you find yourself tasked with, being basically the head judge. You may be the sole judge at some of these cups. And
right. So maybe you've been a player, or maybe you haven't even been a player.
Yeah, somebody tasks you, hey, we're going to have this thing called League Cups. Pokemon's new to the store. I need you, with your experience, to be in the role of judge. You passed that professor test, whatever, but you've been thrown in that role. I attended an event. We attended an event where I was not in a judge role. We kind of went last minute, and the store was so crowded. I dropped my daughter off, and I kind of came back towards the end of the event, did other errands and things, and while doing deck checks, I heard there was two young judges there, and they were exclaiming, something about a deck check problem, and we don't need to get into the detailed mechanics, but it's the age-old, how do you handle different art, same card but different art versions. They were gonna, game loss, etc., where you really had legal deck and legal deck list, but they didn't match. Okay.
Right. So in that particular case, if you go by the letter of the guidelines, at worst it's a prize loss.
Yeah. So at worst it's prize loss, right? But the concern overhearing the conversation between the judges is kind of like, hey, I got it. Oh yeah, I got a game loss. And from a perception, it was almost like, yeah, I always wanted to shoot my gun. I finally got a penalty. Here's one. I've got it. We've got to be careful when we're in closed, confined spaces like that. It kind of goes back to penalties are earned by the players. Right. They're not things that us judges are just eager and anxious to dish out. And by God, we finally found one, and this is our moment.
Yeah, as a judge, a great event is when I don't give out a single penalty at all. We should never be happy to give out a penalty. We should never feel bad about it either, because it's, as Doug just said, players earn them. But on the other hand, we should definitely never be happy about it either.
Yeah, but I get it. You're a judge. It's kind of like, you're in the Army or whatever. You've trained for this. You want to use those skills and apply them. So internally, you're like, hey, I get to use my skills. But how we visually display that could be misinterpreted. But my concern when the dialogue was there is there was no rationale. They weren't catching legal deck list.
Well, they weren't using the penalty guidelines,
so
right?
The bottom line when I inquired is I said, well, hey, let's go turn to the penalty guidelines if you mind. Didn't involve Sydney wasn't involved. I should caveat this. She didn't make cut that day. This was just me sticking my nose in, trying to assist some confused judges that were looking for help. And what I discovered is that they did not. I said, let's go get our penalty guidelines. Do you have a copy? Is it on your phone? Is it anywhere? And it turned out they weren't using the penalty guidelines at this event. They were loosely aware of them. And the feedback I got was, well, this is how this was ruled last week at an event that I heard. It was kind of whispered down the lane. And, that's a problem at many levels.
They were doing, this is how we were told it was done, as opposed to using the actual guidelines.
Right. And from a, we could go many angles on this from a customer service, that how, giving out penalties consistently from event to event, let alone within the course of that event. If you weren't referring to a common document and you had two judges there, hopefully they were consulting and not just, as a player. I think that's one of the things that I recoil a little bit on Facebook the other day. There was a statement that all judges should be competitive players, right now first. And I thought, well, certainly I think play experience helps. It doesn't hurt you, right?
Yeah.
But when I look at the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, I don't know that all those refs and umps, etc., are noted, LeBron level players.
It's a different skill set.
It's a different skill set. And in fact, I would caution some of the judges that are more player than judge, when they're watching a game, they get caught up in thinking how they strategically would play the game. When I talk to them afterwards, it's, the commentary is more, I wouldn't have played this card then. Did you know you could have done this, or you could have won the game by doing that? But boy, did you notice they forgot weakness or resistance, okay? It's really paying attention. Is the game being played correctly, not are you doing the best thing to win the game? Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to disassociate yourself from that when you're a strongly that competitive mindset. So I think it's the balance. But going back to
let's jump back to
jumping back to the penalty guidelines and applying them. And I'll say some of the one of my worst days as a judge is we all feel bad when we give a bad penalty, right? And in a scenario where
let's touch on that for a second. So 3 judges in the car actually, because we got Jeff. We got Jeff back there too. Yeah. Of the judges in this car, who has given a bad penalty at some point in their career? And I'll raise my hand.
My hand's raised for those I can't see.
And Jeff is raising his hand. So nobody's expecting perfection.
Yeah, we all make mistakes. We do the best that we can. One of the again, I hate to go on tangents. That's who I am, what I do. One of the things I worry about coming from the player community is there's such an expectation of omniscience, omnipresence, perfection, and I get we should expect quality from the judges, no doubt. But people are human, and we are gonna err, and some of in the heat of the moment, and especially he said, she said, or things that are rewound multiple turns, where maybe dealing with incomplete facts, we get into more subjective decisions that need to be made, and we'd like them to be black and white, and they aren't always, okay?
Yeah.
But, the things that are... So don't shoot yourself in the foot, is my point here. That you have tools and resources, not only the penalty guidelines, but I was going to tie this in, Mike, to the compendium, okay?
Thank you.
And probably my worst, recent day as a judge was not consulting the compendium, because assuming a card that had a phrase or templating that was similar to other, and I wish I could remember the specific card. I'm sorry if you're out there in podcast land and you're the person that got this bad penalty. I apologize. You know who you are.
If we think of it later, I'll put it in text down at the bottom.
But I actually consulted, called another judge, wanted to make sure this was right. I didn't have Wi-Fi access at this particular event. I have Verizon. My smartphone's wasn't working. But when I'm if I kind of don't know something, and even if I sort of think it, as I go back to, people are paying money for those events. We should really ought to know. And we have resources to support us on that. And later I found out that this was a ruling in the compendium, and that's the worst feeling, because you say, wow, I should have maybe had that printed out if I knew. I didn't know at going to this event I was going to be in a judge role.
Right.
I showed up and was asked to be in that. But you know what? I'm an old guy with a lot of experience. Sometimes that's going to happen. You're going to get thrown into this role. Didn't know my Verizon wasn't going to work. So there's things that happen, and I'm not making excuses, just giving an explanation.
Well, let's talk about, you're a new judge.
Right. So if you're a new judge, arm yourself. Yeah,
so there's 3 things you want to make sure you review. Number 1, if you're an organizer, if you're also, we're talking to the organizers here, you go into your Pokemon.com, you bring up your Play Pokemon section, and I'll put the link down here. There's a resource center, bring up rules and resources, and it brings up the floor rules. It talks about who wins if time is called, or is it you're doing Swiss rounds and time's called. How's that handled? You're doing top cut and time is called and the game's not complete. How's that handled? It's different. All of this stuff, you don't have to guess at how you should handle it. It's all outlined in the floor rules.
Right.
Similarly,
when you go to sudden death and why, and what sudden death.
So we're not going to go over the details here, but it's
common confusion.
It's not something that you don't need to figure any of these things out. It's in the rules. Similarly, penalty guidelines. What causes a penalty? What is the proper penalty to give for certain things? Now, you may want to escalate or de-escalate, and we're not going to get into that here, but as a basic start, you want to know what the guidelines suggest. And you don't want to be going off of, well, I heard someone gave that's penalty of such and such an event, so that's what I'm going to give here. Because one thing you learn as you judge more is every situation is different, and there may be mitigating factors that maybe that penalty was harsher, or maybe it was not as harsh as it should have been, or maybe that judge just happened to give the wrong penalty if you're working off of what other people did. So it's important to go off of the penalty guidelines. and I'm giving the links for all these here as we'll have it up. And the compendium. Now I'll self-serve here. Doug recommended the compendium. We have the compendium available on your smartphone. If you want to be extra safe, you can download the hard copy and save it on your phone, so you don't have to worry about getting your Wi-Fi access. But it's good for pulling up rulings on the spot. It's also good to get yourself familiar with it, and that's another thing we're going to be updating soon. We're going to come out with the Compendium GX edition, which should hopefully streamline some of the rulings and update some that over time maybe have not become as useful as they were in the past. Anything else that a new judge should make sure they're familiar with and accessing that you can think of, Doug?
I mean, I think just prior preparation, the night before, all the time before I come to an event, think about the format. Are you going to be expanded? You're going to be at standard. What format is the event going to be at? Are you up? Go to the professor forum, some of the other player forums what are the contentious issues that are occurring within the game, within the format that you're going to be at, and see what developments are occurring. But again, going back, you have the compendium. Mike, if I could also throw an ad for you in the Ask the Rules team, right? Yeah. On PokeGem, that's sort of where a lot of issues are raised pre going to compendium.
Yeah, so we got two places. There's either on the PokeGem.net site, link here, or in the professor forums. There's also card rulings.
Right.
And in both of those cases, it's the same people answering them, and they're parts of they're members of the rules team. So you're going to get an official answer. And so it's just good to ask and get these things. And also, if it's a good question that is something that hasn't been covered before, a lot of times we'll take that and get it officially approved from Japan, because anything that goes in the compendium has been signed off by Pokemon R&D and quite often by Japan if needed. And we'll have the official ruling published in the future that way.
So, Mike, thanks for putting those links in for people, and I can't state enough on that topic as a judge throughout my career on the PokeGem, the Ask the Rules team. I think it's had different names over time, but that's sort of the public face of questions that have been asked about issues, and they will be responded to with an official. You can, as a judge, rely on this, and a player, importantly, as a player, rely on this as a ruling source at your events. And if you're on the professor forum, there's a version there, but that's ingested from professor input.
No, that forum, that is the card ruling forum, which I'll put the link to that here directly as well. You have to be a professor to get to access it.
That's what I'm saying.
But that also, anyone can ask a question in that forum, but they have it set so that only members of the rule team can answer.
Right. Okay, so one point is on these public forums, we want to make sure that we're aware and resourcing of judges of any experience level the things that the players can see and others. That would be sort of embarrassing. If a player can go in and find the answer to a question and take the time to do that, and we didn't know or go and make that same effort when we're there. They're the customers. The players are the customer base. They expect us to know the venues, the resources, where to go. Going back to the umps and the players, my example there, they have their equipment and their decks and all of that. And, we have our responsibility to be prepared for the game and to step on the field ready to go and know what resources are as well.
Well, let me touch on an important point right there, too. You see a lot when people talk about tournaments on the different forums, say Fonverbank, whatever, where you don't want to have players talking about your event in a disparaging way, saying, don't go there because of this, right? So one of the big complaints that people have that you want to avoid falling into that area is if you make a mistake, own the fact that you made the mistake and correct it. One of the biggest complaints people have is, so now we're talking about using the penalty guidelines, using the compendium to have rulings correctly, where staff members, judges, or tournament organizers are not doing things correctly. Players share with them what the correct way is, and referencing the official documents as to why it's correct. Whether it's the floor rules or the tournament guide or the penalty guidelines or the compendium that here the ruling is, and the staff member getting their back up, thinking that the right way to handle this is I can't be seen as having made a mistake, therefore what I said is right, and I'm going to ban you from my store for raising the point that I'm wrong. All you're doing in that case, you may have won that battle, if you want to call it that, and I don't even think that you've even won that battle, because you're more shot yourself in the foot than anything else. But you're causing yourself more problems in the long run, because now you've gotten a reputation that you're not running events properly. And the reputation is not from making the mistake, the reputation is from not correcting the mistake, because everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah.
So be willing to be wrong and to correct if you've done something wrong.
And especially, this just kind of goes back to that same my oops at that one event. Really stepping up and making sure that you correct it at that event. And when you find out you're wrong, ultimately I was able to get a hold of somebody that found that ruling, and I went back and apprised the judges what the correct ruling was. I went to the players that were affected, made sure they know, and man up to my own mistake in the ruling, but to make sure that that would be ruled the proper way for the remainder of the tournament. I think there's confusion even at that event. Somebody said, "Oh, does that mean we have to rule that same way now that the judges ruled a way once? Do we have to keep that way throughout the tournament?" That is not what you're to always rule correctly.
Yeah.
And if you make that incorrect ruling, you should nip that in the bud, and check egos at door, hat in hand, explain what happened. Blame and all that isn't necessary. Education's what's necessary to make sure people have the correct information, and that we didn't create confusion at that event that would spill over to other events. Okay.
Right. Definitely. We are going to wrap up our final segment here talking about. Well, what are we going to talk about, Doug?
Earlier we mentioned, on the theme of service and not having you on an island, whether you're experienced or inexperienced, but the topic of getting others involved, right? When to get others involved, whether it's the head judge, organizers, etc., and then resources for maybe even off-site, how to communicate if you are at a smaller event and it's just you and somebody else and you don't know, there's resources we have now in place to help.
Right, so we were just talking, they've started up, aside from the professor forums, and they ask the rules team, which aren't going to get you immediate questions. Number one, if you can, phone a friend. Get somebody...
Build a network. Get somebody who is a good judge. Have them, number one, mentor you. It's always good to have a mentor. And also have them available. There's lots of people who are very willing to be available to get phone calls. Now, there's actually been started a Discord site. It's kind of like going back to 1985 in terms of what the interface looks like. But judges are available to answer questions like 24/7 almost. So I'll put a link here to if you're a judge and you want to get on the Discord app. So a little more real time than your Ask the Rules team and things like that. So immediate, pick up the phone, call somebody, text, etc. Discord is sort of another lifelines, right? So in your lifeline category.
Yeah. Now another thing you were going to say was about if you're you're not necessarily on staff at a big event, but how do I get on staff at a big event? I don't have experience.
So yeah, volunteer. So getting on an event, we're there, we're judging, and let's again maybe newer judge or you're on staff. Obviously be willing to do anything, etc. But the direction I wanted to go, kind of on quality and consistency and customer service, stepping up the game for the players' expectations. The idea, piggybacking on the comments we use, is consulting. So you want to consult, we give you some resources, etc. Reminder that players should always, be informed that they have the ability to appeal to the head judge at events, right? So that's one aspect. On site, you have experience. Don't be reluctant to bring that experience to bear I remember an organizer getting, one of the most upset I've seen an organizer is when he found out that the head judge didn't get brought to the table until I think it was after 20 or 25 minutes.
I think that was me.
No, it wasn't you. It was, I don't want to mention where it was. It's
okay.
Protecting all the
so
people.
It wasn't, that happens.
It was somewhere in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. It's just, if you're a younger judge, you're going to have meetings, judge meetings, etc. And if something's a prize card penalty or above, you're going to be getting that head judge involved for issuing penalties. They're going to be telling you what those protocols are. And a skill to be developing when you're at the table is when you see something's got hair on it, you need that experience. Don't dig halfway a tunnel to China before you figure out that you're in over your head, and you should ought to have been bringing that experience to bear.
Yeah. So that's a real important point. So like, a lot of people are afraid that if I ask for help, they're going to think I don't know what I'm doing. It's going to be a poor reflection on me, and honestly, that's not the case.
I think it's the opposite, Mike. Right?
Yeah.
I think it's if that's where I was saying check the ego at the door. There's no. I think people are going to evaluate you more on this aspect of putting that ego down and just saying, hey, I don't know the answer to this. It looks kind of ugly. Can you help?
Right.
I want to get some more perspective here. Hey, do we?
They're going to want to see someone who's willing to learn.
Right. And so you get your maybe more experienced buddy that's next to you in the aisle. Joe, can you come over here? Will Post. Will, can you come over here and have a look at that? And then Will may look and say, well, tell me what's involved really quick. We get some fact gathering, and you say, wow, this is going to need the head judge, and let's get that involved.
Right.
The head judge is going to be more upset at you if the attitude is, well, let's just wing it. And, let's not involve. They don't need to know.
We get upset about needing to be called and not being called, either not being called at all and then finding out about something later on that we should have really been involved in, or not getting called for 20 minutes into it, and then now the tournament's delayed for a half hour because we weren't called over. And I've had this, I thought Doug was talking about something that happened to me. I had a situation like that. I got called over, and it's like, oh, that's the answer. Right. And I would have been much happier to have been called over earlier and said that's the answer rather than do that 20 minutes in and now we got a 20 minute
Now you're
delay.
affecting the whole tournament, right?
Yeah.
And offline, like my daughter had some examples, and I think this is a bit of an art, and part of when we talk about learning, judging, and gaining experience, the balance between over-pinging the head judge for everything. Hey, head, going, I'm not sure how retreating works or what happens when you're paralyzed. Let me, and the player disagrees with you. Well, let me go take this to the head judge. Like, there's some level of information and discovery.
You can go to one of your other floor judges and consult with them before you bring.
That's the concept to make sure we clarify with the consult. Consult doesn't necessarily mean grab the head judge for everything.
Right.
And sometimes, the head judges, as events are getting larger, we're seeing 1,000-person masters, at regionals. And regionals are becoming like what nationals used to be. And while events are being staffed up larger and larger, we need to efficiently and effectively use the right people at the most effective usage, right? And reaching out appropriately is very important. So getting that experience involved is important. How about the tournament organizer, Mike? I mean, you've served in both roles as PTO and as a head judge role, etc. And there's circumstances kind of continuing with the service thing of when you maybe have upset players, upset parents.
Right. So
and you still want the tournament experience so they walk away feeling they were treated fairly. Maybe it was a hard ruling.
So toward that end, let's say you're a floor judge and you have an upset player. Number one, you don't want to. Your job as a floor judge is not to be spending time,
assuaging,
soothing upset people. Your job is to be out on the floor, but it doesn't mean it's just like, well, go pound sand. That's the wrong answer. The proper thing is to get it up the line to your lead, to your area judge, to your head judge, and them then bringing in the tournament organizer, because even the head judge is not meant to be spending a lot of time dealing with an upset parent. certainly to at the beginning and for a certain amount of time, but once everything's laid out as the way it is, a lot of times those upset players or parents need to be talked to for a longer period of time. At that point, it really comes, again, back to customer service, and that level of customer service is the tournament organizer's responsibility. So you want to get that kind of long-term dealing with an upset person to the highest level, to the tournament organizer, so they're spending their time dealing with it. But you don't, as a floor judge, should not be investing bearing that cross, investing that time into it.
And I'd say, even to take it even to another level, right? Even the PTOs have somebody to go to at regionals, right? There's often a TPCI rep. It's going to be there. I'm not saying to call them in.
Yeah, you're not going to bring them in until.
I'm not saying. Let me make my comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, before you edit that. Okay, at your tournaments, there's another level that's often on site, and I just want to give a shout out to Dan Brandt. Okay, because I've seen, while it's not common, it sometimes happens. I've seen Dan Brandt get involved with whether it's an upset parent situation, or etc. And here's the thing that you can always do. If you're not, if you're off to the side, you're on a break, whatever, sometimes observe and learn. Okay, and watching Dan Brandt's got a very unique skill in his listening skills and abilities that diffuses and I think de-escalates. I think somebody's very upset. There's a way and a mannerism of how you can deflate the situation just by your posture, your body language, etc.
Right.
And I think Dan's one of he and I observed this, and so I went to him after in the evening after the event and just said, hey, I saw this happen. Can we talk about that? And we talked about this topic of diffusing, heated situations. And he shared with me his thoughts, his skills, and how he learned that. And it's that's another, reminder that you can go to these experienced judges and people, and I'd say people are happy to share their thoughts, and when you notice that they have done something well,
right,
and are asking, hey, can I learn more about that? Help me with that.
So,
Mike, I would, as you said, we're wrapping up here. You recently posted somewhere I saw Mike Martin's rules.
Yes.
Right? If you find them, is that on Facebook, or where did we put that?
I have them on Facebook, but I can put them there somewhere.
They're out there, link to it, whatever. Mike Martin Rule 0, right?
Yes.
Throughout this whole conversation here today, and almost any role you have at a Pokemon event, whether you're a volunteer, a judge, camera guy, etc. Rule 0. What are we trying to accomplish here? Big picture. Keep your eye on the prize, on the big picture. Sometimes we get mired down in the moment, etc. And there's a bigger picture afoot, and that reset and refocus will often serve you well. And the inability to do that, again, is where I see things often go awry.
Yeah, definitely. Where touching on the deck list problem that Doug talked on earlier, where the alternate art, it's on the list, 4 buzzkills, not buzzkills, four buzzwalls, and 2 of them are the regular art and 2 of them are the full art, but they wrote them down as 4 full art. Exact same card, play-wise. Going by the letter of the law, you'd be giving a game, not a game loss, a prize penalty for that, legal deck, legal list. But really, at Worlds and at NAIC and big tournaments, the judges don't give out prize losses for that because it's the same card. And what are we trying to accomplish here? We're trying to keep people from having an advantage that they shouldn't have, and there's no advantage there. So therefore, you give a warning because they really should be doing it properly, but you don't need to. You can de-escalate it, right? So it's all about what are we trying to accomplish. I want to thank Doug.
Thanks, Mike. It's great. We're riding along here. We're almost to the event.
We're halfway, more than halfway to the Roanoke regionals, and hopefully we're going to have a great weekend there. I won't be getting this up until after that, so I'll speak that we've had a great event and everyone had a great time.
Hope you had fun in Virginia, and hope we followed the advice we gave.
Yeah.
That's even better.
All right. Thanks very much, Doug.
Thank you.
Take care.